Welcome back, it is Chris Nichols, and we are coming today from the beautiful Yellowstone National Park. We're out here looking for wildlife. We've already found some, and that's because we have an early look at the pre-production Nikon Z8.
You getting anything?
You know, I'm just having a hard time focusing on the images because I'm thinking about this great software called PicFlow.
Tell me more.
You see, Jordan, it's this client gallery that's made for commercial photographers and creative studios. You can add markups, change approval status, comments, labels. You can customize all this as well to fit your project. Click the link in the description below for more information.
Hey, thanks for telling me, Chris.
No problem, Jordan. Now that I've got that off my chest, I think I can go back to shooting some photos here. So is this just a baby Z9? Essentially, in a lot of ways, yes. I mean, we've got the exact same 45 megapixel sensor. We've got the same EVF. We've got the same articulating LCD panel. We've got a very similar control layout. This has the exact same autofocusing capabilities, although this does now add airplane subject detection. It does feel very similar as far as the capabilities go, but what are the differences? So right off the bat, the big change you're going to notice is that it's quite a bit smaller than the Nikon Z9. This is 30% smaller than the Z9. It is 15% smaller than even a Nikon D850, so it is a very compact camera. Now this is actually a really big benefit for me because I far prefer a more compact camera. My biggest complaint with the Z9 was just the size of it. I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm not a huge fan of vertical battery grips, especially when they're built into the camera. I like that at least here it's optional, and no, I'm not going to use one at all on this trip. But this camera is still going to be bigger than a Z6, Z7 II. And one thing I will say, the grip on it feels like a Z9. It's that larger grip. For my hands, I'd actually prefer a smaller grip, but I know a lot of people are really going to like the way this camera feels. It's 910 grams. That's less than half a knocked. I mean, it's very easy to carry around, which is a good thing because I've got this 600mm f4 that I'm sporting today, and so this actually does take a little bit of the weight away. So it occurs to me that you might not all be familiar with the Nikon Z9, and by far its steamiest characteristic, that it has no mechanical shutter. Now there's this stigma against electronic shutters, which in some cases is quite true, that you'll get rolling shutter problems, that you'll have problems with studio flashes and things like that. But this uses the same sensor as the Nikon Z9 and really is quite advanced. So first off, you get 14-bit RAWs, even shooting this electronic only shutter. You also get very good flash sync speeds, up to 200th of a second, and of course you do have auto FP if you want to go above that with Nikon speed lights. You also get a maximum 32,000th of a second shutter speed, so if you want to handle very bright light situations with fast aperture lenses wide open, you don't even necessarily need to go to ND filters. Now, one of the main changes you're going to see here is actually with the memory card storage. So the Z9 had twin CF Express card slots along with an incredible buffer that meant that you could back up onto both cards simultaneously and just shoot and shoot and shoot. The Z8 does give you instead a single CF Express card slot and then an SD card slot. Now I like having SD cards because they're ubiquitous. I got tons of them, but if I was going to do backup to both cards, although I still have the excellent buffer here, that might slow things down a little bit if you really push it. So I think one of the biggest changes that is going to polarize people between the larger Z9 and then the Z8 is just the battery source itself. So this is down to using EL15s. It can't use the standards, but it can be powered off of A's and B's, and if you use C's, you can charge them in camera. We actually have a change here. We've got a separate port. I can't open it with gloves for both the PD rated charging and then the transfer itself separately. So yes, battery life with a single EL15 is going to be substantially less than what the Z9 will give you with its large battery. However, you can put on the battery grip and then you can use two EL15s, and that'll almost double your battery power. And as well, we're still getting pretty good record times. 8K about 90 minutes, 4K roughly 2 hours. So, you know, it's still not a bad compromise if you want the smaller body. Now, a lot of photographers appreciate how rugged the Z9 is. Are we giving anything up here? It isn't to the same standard for weather sealing as a Z9, but I've been told it's very similar to the Nikon D850, which I know a lot of you out there have beat the shit out of. So I think it's still going to stand up to a lot of abuse. So we got a beautiful windless day out here in the Lamar Valley, and we found this still water, so it's time for a petapixel puddle picture party. Now, one of our favorite things from the Nikon Z9 is this articulating screen, because really in situations like this, you can position it in so many angles. If you're ever shooting like low angle stuff like this, trying to get down to the water, this fully articulating screen makes it very easy. So I'm just shooting these bison up here on the ridge, and as you've probably seen, I'm shooting a lot handheld, and I'm finding this to be a very stable platform. Even though this is a lot smaller than the Z9, it's got the same setup where there's no mechanical shutter, just electronic shutter only, so there's no shutter shock to the body. I can make it completely silent, and the sensor reads out so quickly that rolling shutter is not really an issue. I also have the same stabilizer as the Z9, so I'm actually finding no problems hand holding this. I mean, it's stable, stays on target, it's not shaking all around, even when I'm shooting 600 millimeters or with the teleconverter. All right, let's talk about burst rates first, because when shooting wildlife like this, I like to shoot fast bursts just to maximize my chances of getting a good moment. And this camera shoots the exact same as the Z9, which is very good for wildlife because it's very fast. Sports, action, wildlife, this is ideal. 20 frames per second, which is pretty much the maximum that I would ever personally use. I can shoot that with RAW plus JPEG using lossless compressed RAWs. And if I want to shoot even faster than that, I can go to 30 frames per second shooting high quality JPEG only. I could shoot 60 frames per second if I'm okay with a DX crop, and I can shoot 120 frames per second if I'm okay with lower resolution files. Now, with the Z8 being a more compact, more affordable camera, I thought that one place we'd see a compromise is in the buffer, but actually it seems to have the same kind of buffer as the Z9, and that is also very impressive. You can shoot in a high efficiency RAW format. The image quality loss is basically negligible, but with the CF Express card in there, you can shoot up to 1,000 shots. I mean, that is way longer than most people would ever really need. Now, there is one thing here. If we use an SD card, we have to expect that we're not going to get the same buffer performance going to that. I can't speak to the exact numbers or rates there because this is still a pre-production camera. That's certainly something we're going to test when we get a full production Z8. But still, regardless, whatever you're using card format-wise, this camera is very fast shooting. It does have a good sustainable burst rate. And I think for action, sports, and wildlife, this is more compact than the Z9, but almost as capable. So I also want to talk about the shooting experience as far as autofocusing goes today with this camera. Long story short, it seems basically identical to the performance I would get on a Z9. First off, this is only the second Nikon mirrorless camera to feature 3D tracking. We're happy to see that implementation backing these cameras because it's actually very simple to set up and very intuitive. Subject detection seems to be picking up animals effectively. It's going to birds' eyes very well. So overall, I am pretty confident that I'm getting a lot of shots here that are keepers. Well, the sun's getting a little bit lower in the sky. We were up at 4:30 this morning, so we had maximum chance for wildlife viewing out here at the park, and it's time to call it a day. However, Jordan has been shooting on a Nikon Z8 all day as well, and I just want to say the Z9 was one of his favorite video cameras. He really liked the quality and the interface, so we're going to come back to him tomorrow and see what he thinks about now shooting on the Z8 once he gets a chance to look at the files.
Hey, it's Jordan to talk about the video capabilities, and as Chris mentioned, I filmed this entire episode in the Z8 in 8K, but also using the autofocus, which is something that I very rarely do, but I've really come to trust the Z8 when I'm shooting video. Previously, when I was reviewing the Z9, I called it the most intuitive hybrid mirrorless camera for video shooters, and that absolutely holds true with the Z8, and most impressively, there's really no sacrifices to the video capability. So we have all the same record modes with this. I really like that you can record internal 10-bit 8K video up to 30 frames per second, and these are actually very usable file sizes, and they're actually not that difficult to edit as well. So this is a mode I would actually use quite frequently. We also get 4K recording, again in 10-bit up to 120 frames per second, but you also have raw video recording options. So we've got the option of NRAW up to that 8.3K. This is only editable in Resolve, but it's going to get you very sharp, very flexible raw video. You also have the option to do ProRes RAW, which is a little bit more accepted format format, but unfortunately that mode is subsampled. So if your editor will support it, I would use the NRAW whenever possible. I found the autofocus actually very reliable, and I love the autofocus interface on this camera. It did sometimes struggle in situations like when we were shooting through snow, and when I jumped over to manual focus for critical focus in those, I do wish we had a little more detailed viewfinder on this. Now, I love the fact that there's almost no latency when you're shooting photos, but that's not really a factor when recording video. And when I'm punching in, checking focus, I'd love to have a more detailed viewfinder like what a lot of the competition at this price offers. But just in terms of overall video functionality, this is my favorite hybrid mirrorless camera for shooting video at this price point.
So I think when you take a look at the Nikon Z8, you're going to make a natural connection to the Nikon D850, and honestly I think that's exactly what Nikon wants you to do, because the Nikon D850 was an incredibly popular SLR. It just suited so many different photographers. Really high image quality, compact body, good autofocus, still rugged enough for most situations. The difference though was that you had a choice between either the D5/D6 or the D850, but they were very different cameras. The D5 and D6 were made for sports, action, and wildlife, and the D850 was really more for high resolution art photography, portraiture, that kind of stuff. But there's a very different dynamic going on here between the Z8 and the Z9, where Nikon used to have a camera that was more for general photography and another one for sports, action, and wildlife. And although the Z9 is truly a flagship camera that can do video, sports, action, art, all that kind of stuff, this can basically do all the exact same stuff. And I think that's really the significant thing here. You have a camera which has the exact same autofocusing capabilities, image quality, ruggedness is maybe not up to the Z9 standard, but it's pretty close. And the real difference is going to be this is a lower price point and it's a more compact body, which honestly, most people are going to prefer. I really do think the Z8 is going to sell incredibly well. Also, as a hybrid camera, nothing's being lost here compared to the Z9 as far as video capabilities go. And I think a lot of people are going to appreciate this smaller form factor for video applications too. So I think the Z8 is actually going to put a lot of pressure on the competition. This competes against the Canon EOS R5, and although both are really nice handling cameras and the R5 is cheaper with maybe slightly more consistent autofocus, this is definitely a superior video camera, and I would say picture taker as well. So the other camera this is going to compete directly against as far as price point goes and capabilities is the Sony A7R5. And we love the Sony A7R5. I mean, it's got great image quality with that 60 megapixel sensor, but to be honest, 45 megapixels for most people is absolutely plenty. The other thing with the Sony A7R5 is going to be its autofocusing capabilities, and that is going to be its real strength. Nikon's autofocus is very easy to implement. We like the way it works, but there are still some situations where we have trouble and inconsistencies with subject detection. Snow could be a problem, shallow depth of field, and hopefully that's something we'll see improve in the future. However, this has a much better sensor as far as readout speed goes. I mean, I love the fact that it's electronic only, and as a video camera, this is a much better camera than the Sony A7R5. And so I think as a hybrid, this might win a lot of people over compared to that camera. But the last thought that I want to leave you guys with is, normally manufacturers will take a camera like this, which is a lower price point, more compact body, and then they'll take away some features compared to their flagship cameras to differentiate them. And what's unique here is that is absolutely not the case. This is a baby Z9, and I think that's a very interesting strategy, because clearly what Nikon wants to do is win a lot of market share back with this camera. And honestly, the way they've designed it, I think they're going to be very successful with that. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this initial look at the brand new Nikon Z8. And remember, this is a brand new project for us at Petapixel. We absolutely would appreciate your support. So if you're a first-time viewer or you haven't subscribed yet, please do so now. We would really appreciate that. Like the video if you have time. Leave comments below. Let us know what you think about the brand new Nikon Z8 as well. I also want to give a huge thanks to the people that helped us out in Yellowstone National Park making this video. First off, Christy Odom, very talented wildlife photographer. She gave us lots of great advice while we were shooting out in the park. And Evan Stout, fantastic guide, showed us a lot of wonderful stuff, got us into very interesting wildlife photography situations. So please do check out the work that they do and the photography that they make. You'll definitely want to see that. And while you're at it, check out our social media as well. We'd appreciate follows there too. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you soon with another episode shortly on Petapixel.